Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
And what is up, you guys? Welcome to the stream. Tony Metro here as the offseason, at least for us Mets fans, marches on. We are, at this point, basically just waiting for the rest of the 2025 postseason to play out. We are in the championship series. You got the Mariners with a 1-0 lead in the ALCS, and the Dodgers and the Brewers about to get underway in game one of that series tonight as well. At this point, really don't care who wins the World Series as long as it's not the Dodgers. You guys all know how I feel about them and about that. You guys might have seen my videos that I give you the Mets fan hater guide of who to root for in each of these series, and there'll be another when we do finally know who is playing in the Fall Classic. But that does not mean that there is not stuff still to discuss in Mets Slam. We know, of course, with a disappointing season with some looming free agencies, the most important of which is the homegrown player, Pete Alonso, that there is always something to talk about in Mets Land. So today we are going to discuss Pete Alonso's impending free agency and whether or not the Mets will, in fact, re-sign him, make him a New York Met in the orange and blue for life, especially based on the recent news that we just heard this week. So welcome to the stream, guys. Appreciate you tuning in. If you guys are new here, be sure to subscribe for daily Mets content. You can also follow me on all my other platforms: TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Links to all of those are in the description of this video down below. Be sure to leave this video a like. Really appreciate you guys doing that. Helps the channel out a ton. So let's get into it. We know that Pete Alonso and the Mets were trying to figure something out last year. It was a very weird offseason where the Mets, of course, were coming off, or I'm sorry, Pete was coming off a down season. And of course, with his age, the Mets weren't exactly sure how to go about it. You had the whole situation with David Stearns coming in, him being kind of a small market general manager over from Milwaukee. And that basically dragged out until January when the Mets and their fans actually came to a fan fest hosted by the Mets, that is, rather, at Citi Field. And the question was posed by fans directly to Steve Cohen and David Stearns. Now, keep in mind, after the Mets had just signed Juan Soto to his $750 million contract. But essentially, is Pete Alonso going to be a Met? And the answer that those guys gave did not please the Mets fans that were in attendance for that one, as they actually booed Stearns and Cohen right in front of them to their faces. And it wasn't too long after that that Steve Cohen, who happened to be down in Tampa for other business tendings, called Pete Alonso. They met in person, and maybe a week after that, they got the deal done. It was the $25.5 million deal that was going to have the additional opt-in player option for Pete this year. Essentially a 1-year prove-it deal. If it doesn't work out, Pete has another down season like he did in 2024. He could opt out, opt in and have that security. Instead, Pete Alonso had a really solid 2025 season, 38 home runs, had an average of 272, an OBP of 347. The slugging percentage was at 524. It was an 871 OPS, the highest mark that he has had since his Rookie of the Year 2019 season. He had some really big hits with runners in scoring position. Impactful 2025 season from Pete Alonso. That was a word that was thrown around a lot to describe his 2024 year, but in the other way, that, yeah, he still hit 34 home runs in 2024, but it was a lot of garbage time home runs. It's a lot of what I like to call Lucas Duda home runs. Lucas Duda was the guy who was just always known for hitting a bunch of home runs when the Mets were either up by 6 or down by 6, and that is pretty much what Pete Alonso did in 2024. Of course, up until he hit that home run in Milwaukee to send the Mets to the NLCS. But regardless, the Mets got the deal done with Pete. He had a really good 2025, but it does not make this negotiation any easier, because now we are talking about Pete, who is a year older, who was really exposed defensively this year at first base and cost this team some games. And now we hear the news this week that he is reportedly seeking a 7-year contract from whatever teams that he speaks with this offseason. So let's get into it. We're going to break it down. We're going to talk about whether or not that is a a good idea for the Mets if they should commit to him that long, if any team is going to. We're going to look at his numbers, and then we're going to look at some of the other players around baseball, some impending free agents, some trade targets, and see if there's another option. I just put out a video not long ago here this afternoon, a short, about the Mets taking a page out of the Yankees playbook and how they use the plan B to try to replace Juan Soto. And let's be honest, it worked pretty well for the Yankees. Instead of signing Juan Soto, they put that money toward Max Fried, an ace at the top of the rotation. They traded for Cody Bellinger and took on the significant amount of money that was remaining on that contract. We'll hear more about him later in this stream, that's for sure. So maybe the Mets' best course of action with so many holes on this roster, including trying to fix the rotation, including probably needing another position player, not just Pete at first base, might be the best way for the Mets to go about this offseason. So let's get into it. I'm going to share my screen over here with you guys so you guys will be able to see everything that I'm looking at here. Welcome. There you go. You got to look at my Twitter, guys. Appreciate y'all tuning in. So Pete, of course, like I said, really solid year. The batting average, 272, highest of his career. On base percentage, 347, a 524 slugging percentage. And like I said, that 871 OPS, it was the highest of his career since his rookie of the year season in 2019. Just barely short of 40 home runs. And of course, drove in 126 RBI. And look, there are few and far between sluggers in Major League Baseball that are as good of run producers as Pete Alonso is. It is going to be incredibly hard to try to replace that type of run production that the Mets got from Pete Alonso. We have heard ideas, hey, maybe Ryan Clifford is that guy. A lot of people are really high on him. He's one of the Mets' top prospects. He is a first baseman with a lefty swing. A lot of his batted ball profiles show that he is going to be somebody that can probably succeed in the big leagues. At the end of the day, he is a prospect. Prospects are suspects until proven otherwise. I am not going to go into next season believing that Ryan Clifford is just automatically going to be able to step into those shoes and even deliver half of what Pete Alonso can give this team. So I'm going to squash that idea right away. If it is not Pete Alonso being re-signed to the Mets, you cannot sell me on the idea that Ryan Clifford is just going to step into the role as starting first baseman, hit 20 to 25 home runs, which would be really good for a rookie. But even that, I don't know if it's believable. Or even worse, you're going to try to sell me on Mark Vientos going over to first base after the abysmal sophomore slump that he just had, not to mention the defensive issues that he has had on both corners of the infield. So I'm just putting that out there right away. Me personally, I do not want to see a solution that is going to try to be sold to me from internally for this Mets team. That's just my opinion on it. I don't know how you guys feel about it. Let me see. Go down to the chat. Mark Rapp, what is up, my man? How's it going? He says, this team needs some changes. Trade McNeil, let Pete go, and sign Cody and either Tucker or Bregman if possible. Move Nimmo, get some pitching. I like a lot of what you just said there, Mark. Look, I would love to do all those things. I don't think Tucker is realistic. And honestly, I think Tucker is going to get way, way overpaid. Had a really bad second half with the Cubs. They are talking 10 years, $400 million for him. He is 28 years old. He is not that much younger than Pete Alonso or than Cody Bellinger. Cody Bellinger is someone I am definitely interested in, and I will get into him a little bit more as the stream rolls along here. As far as Nimmo, unfortunately, it's basically just an untradeable contract at this point. I love Brandon Nimmo. I love what he brings to this team when healthy, but unfortunately, it just looks like at this point in his career, he is never, ever going to be fully healthy. He has slowed down in left field. Yes, he hit a career high 25 homers this year. He doesn't draw as many walks now, though. His OPS is significantly lower because of that. So unfortunately, there is no moving Brandon Nimmo, and honestly, I'm still even kind of torn on that if it was a realistic possibility. But yes, changes are made. As far as Jeff McNeil, I will help Jeff pack up his bags and get on out of here yesterday. I definitely think if there is anything you can bet on as good as gold this offseason for the Mets, is that Jeff McNeil will be traded. Jeff McNeil, in my opinion, will not be on the 2026 opening day roster for the New York Mets. I would be very, very surprised by that. Daniel Albarandi, pay him. I'm pretty firm on 150. All right, so 5 years, 150 would be, I guess that is what, $30 million average annual value? Yes, so 5 years, $30 million each year. That's not terrible, honestly. It is not far off at all from what I'm thinking for Pete. So here's what we're going to do, actually. We're going to go and take a look at Spotrac. And what we're looking at here right now are the upcoming free agents in 2026. Now, these are all position players because obviously that is all we care about right now. We don't need to look at the pitchers. But this is going to give us a pretty good idea of what these guys are making right now and what their market value is being estimated at for next season. So literally right here at the top of the list, you can see Pete Alonso is the second guy on this list as far as what he got paid this year, $27 million for the Mets this year. That was obviously a great return on their investment. 38 home runs, 126 RBIs, and all the other things that he did this year for the team. But now when you look at the market value, basically what they're estimating that he's going to get in a next contract, they have him listed at $29.4 million. So you're not far off at all, Daniel. You are very close with your $30 million estimate. The question comes, is it going to be on a 5 or 5, 6, 7 year contract for Pete? And me personally, that scares me. I don't know if that long-term commitment to Pete is exactly worth it. And I sound like a hypocrite probably, and anybody that is a Mets fan that likes the Juan Soto deal but is afraid of giving Pete 5 years is a hypocrite. I'll just be totally honest, because we are tied to Soto for 15 years, 14 more now after this season, and he's 26, about to be 27 next season. It's not that much of a difference. Pete will be 31 here in December. So we'd be talking about Pete's age 31, 32, 33, 34, and age 35 seasons on a 5-year contract. I'm sorry, 36 as well. So personally, I think it is realistic if we're talking a 5-year contract. But we heard this week that he's looking for a 7-year contract. And I am just here to say that is all bullshit. Okay. That is all posturing from his agent. We know his agent, Scott Boras, loves to go out there, say all kinds of outlandish things to try to prop up his guys. It's what a good agent should do, right? But sometimes he overplays his hand. Sometimes he goes a little too over the top. And that was nearly the case for Pete last year. The Mets fortunately got that deal done with him. And I honestly think it was a very fair deal with the opt-out for this season. But in the past, Jordan Montgomery really got the short end of the stick there, and a few other players whose names I just can't think of at this very moment. But that is what Scott Boras is going to do, and this is what any good agent should do. Start the bidding at a ridiculous number or a ridiculous term that you know teams won't touch, and see how it goes down from there, and try to find a middle ground of where teams are comfortable and what you wanted, and try to get that deal done. So 5 years, $150 million does not sound outlandish to me. That is not something that is going to hamstring you either. That probably takes Pete through the end of his career. He probably plays his entire life in the orange and blue at that point, unless he really wants to continue playing at age 36, still has anything left in the tank, and then at that point, all bets are off. But I can absolutely see a 5-year, $150 million deal getting it done for the Mets and Pete Alonso. I really like that from you, Daniel. Rod says, Tony, do you think we should call up Jet Williams and Carson Bench to fill in that second base and center field role? I think that it is going to fully depend on how these guys perform in spring training. I think Carson Bench, I am almost of the mindset at this point that I have him basically penciled in as the starting center fielder next year. He looks tremendous. He was great, tore it up in AA, really solid numbers in AAA. The sample size was so small that David Stearns was not ready to bring him up to the big leagues this year the way that he had to rush Jonah Tong and Brandon Sproat to the big leagues for the rotation. But 100%. I think that Benj is going to have a great spring training, and I do believe that he is going to be the everyday center fielder from the jump next year, unless there's going to be some type of roster manipulation where they are trying to maintain extra years of control of him for the Mets, then I definitely believe that Benj will be the opening day center fielder for the Mets. As far as Jet Williams, I'm really not sure. He is one guy that I know he is obviously one of the better prospects in the system, one of the better prospects in baseball. I would love to see him be the opening day second baseman if he earns it, but I'm just not totally sold on him or his profile. I have said it before. I think the size thing is definitely something that gives me a little bit of pause. I know there are plenty of examples of undersized guys that have turned in really great big league careers. I don't know if Williams will ever hit for that power, but what I do love about Jet Williams is the speed, the athleticism, and the defensive versatility that he brings to the field, something that the Mets really lacked this year. Let's be honest. Defensively, this Mets team was a mess. I was holding my breath pretty much any time the ball was put in play this year. So I could totally see both those guys cracking the opening day roster. I also see another world where the Mets decide they're not ready and they have emergency backup plans in place in the form of veterans that will hold down the fort until a midseason call up for either of them. So hopefully that is the case with them, that they do perform well enough in spring training and that the Mets believe they're ready to take the reins at those positions. But knowing David Stearns, also would not be surprised if we saw what we saw this year in the form of Tyrone Taylor, Jose Siri being center fielders, and then, of course, with Jeff McNeil still at second base. Hopefully Jeff McNeil will not be here. But to get back to Pete really quick, he's getting estimated at a market value of $29 million. Again, he will turn 31 here in December. And let's be honest, Pete really cost this team defensively at first base. And I don't want to hear this whole thing, defense at first base is not important, blah, blah, blah. It is. I'm sorry, it is. And I will say probably the most important defensive aspect of being a first baseman is scooping throws from your infielders. And no one has more scoop throws than Pete Alonso over the last couple of years. So I credit him for that. I recognize that Pete is among the, if not the best, scooping first baseman in baseball. But when he needs to move his feet to get to a ball to his left, to his right, laying out, and of course, his biggest issue, feeding the ball to a covering pitcher at first base, it is an absolute disaster. It is holding your breath, just like I said about any time the ball is put in play. Probably the most I've held my breath is watching Pete Alonso try to throw the ball to a covering pitcher at first base. And of course, we know that it got Kodai Senga hurt. We know that it cost them in a couple other situations this year. And without even talking about a covering pitcher at first base, we know that he had some errant throws to home plate as well. One that opened the door for a huge Yankees rally there in the 8th inning out in the Bronx back in May. There have been many, many times that Pete just has shown his warts defensively. And so for me, the whole caveat to a Mets and Pete Alonso long-term reunion, not one of these 1 year and opt-out kind of situations, which, let's be honest, Pete coming off the season he just came off of, being the age that he is absolutely not going to accept that. So if that is David Stearns' plan, hey, we're going to try and do the same thing, run it back, give him that big average annual value this year with an opt-out or an opt-in for next year, that is not going to get the job done. I can tell you that right now. If the Mets are going to get a long-term reunion done with Pete Alonso, it needs to be with the caveat that he will accept a role playing DH more often, that he will be in the field from time to time, but he is no longer the everyday first baseman. And for a couple of reasons. Number one, he obviously has cost his team defensively, as I just laid out. And number two, it will keep him healthy and good for the long run, good for the long haul. Don't make him be on his feet constantly. Don't make him constantly need to grind out 162 games in the field. Because if we are getting married to you, Pete, we want to know that you were going to be able to fulfill the entire term of this obligation that we are handing to you right here in this marriage contract. So for me, personally, it is one of those things where, Pete, we want you back. We want you back for the long haul, but you need to accept it on our terms. We'll meet the money demands. $30 million over 5 years, I would sign that immediately. 5 years, $150 million, I think immediately Pete Alonso is signing that contract today. And if I'm David Stearns, I'm giving him that. But if he's looking for anything more than that, or if he's going to try and say that he's a first baseman and he is not going to accept DHing more often, those are two deal breakers for me. Those are two things that Pete needs to be aware of. And I will say this, Pete did come out and acknowledge recently when this whole report of him seeking a 7-year contract that he is likely going to become a DH at some point, that he is going to need to do more designated hitting. So I appreciate that self-awareness from Pete Alonso. But these are things that we need to have written into the contract, things that we cannot have loose ends about. And I do think that Pete will oblige to those kinds of thoughts because I know he loves being a Met. And if he feels respected and taken care of monetarily with this contract, I can see him coming back. So 5 years, $150 million is about where I am capping it, though. I'm not going higher than that, and I am not going longer than that. Not for a guy that is 31, and I hate to say this, but I've already said it in the past before, so whatever. But not for a guy who, let's be honest, his body is probably not exactly going to age the best in terms of athleticism. He's not a particularly fast runner or a good base runner. We know about his defense. I have gone on and on about it. Hopefully the bat speed is something he'll be able to keep over the length of that contract. But 5 years is about where I'm comfortable doing that. And this is exactly what they're saying. $29.4 million for the market value estimation. So that's my opinion on Pete. And just to give you an idea, here are the market value contracts estimates for the upcoming free agent position players. Pete is number 3 on this list. The first one is Kyle Tucker, $40 million. Like I said, possibly getting a 10-year, $400 million deal. He is not significantly younger than Pete Alonso. He is 2 years younger than Pete. And Kyle Tucker is a tremendous player, don't get me wrong. But he is coming off a very, very poor second half with Chicago, a place where it sounds like he can't wait to get out of. And so for me personally, I would be terrified to see him try and come play in New York. Not that I think the Mets are even remotely in the market for Kyle Tucker, not after having given that contract to Juan Soto. So I think you can just completely forget about Kyle Tucker ever being an option for the New York Mets. But the second guy on this list, right above Pete Alonso, as you can see, for $30 million at his market value, is the guy that was just playing across town in Cody Bellinger. And I bring him up because I said earlier when I began this stream, the Mets may be best doing a pivot, plan B, in the same way that the Yankees did last offseason when they missed out on signing Juan Soto. And I'll get into that in just a moment here, but let me go back to the chat here. CB24203, just give Pete the money. He's got to start DH eventually, though. He's going to realize how good it makes him feel at the end of the year. 100%. And you know what? They say the best ability is availability. And I love that Pete can go out and play 162 games. He rarely ever misses games, rarely ever is hurt for an extended period of time. Really, truly appreciate the Iron Man type of mentality that Pete Alonso has. It is so scarce now in professional sports these days. But how can we get the best out of Pete Alonso? I bet you him DHing more often, or maybe even half of the season, would inflate those offensive numbers even more. So 100% with you there, CB. Rod says, Tony, if Alonso leaves, do you think that we should get a temporary guy like Josh Naylor or Ryan O'Hearn or rush up Ryan Clifford or even Jacob Reimer? Okay. Lots of really good names there. Good question there from you, Rod. I like the idea of Josh Naylor, who just hit an absolute bomb in the ALCS here that I'm watching. Seattle really taking it to Toronto 10-3, about to steal both games out in Toronto here in the ALCS. Like the idea of Naylor a lot. Lefty bat, gamer, hits for power, decent in the field. Not much better than Pete, but a little bit better, that is for sure. It depends on the length of those deals, because I don't want to block Ryan Clifford. I know I said before that, hey, don't try and sell me on Ryan Clifford being the savior for this team if Pete walks in free agency this year. That's not to say I don't believe that Ryan Clifford won't eventually become an impact bat. I just don't want to hedge all of my bets on the 2026 season on an unproven rookie coming up and replacing those types of numbers that Pete has put up for this team for a number of years. So I do like the idea of a short-term guy. I really like Ryan O'Hearn. I know that a lot of Mets people on Twitter have been saying Ryan O'Hearn couldn't hold a candle to Pete Alonso. Well, the truth is he actually kind of can. The numbers aren't too far off. He actually had a better WAR than Pete did this year, despite significantly lower numbers at the plate, but that's because of how good he is defensively at first base. So Ryan O'Hearn, Josh Naylor, definitely two names I would very much be interested in as short-term placeholders at first base. But again, guys that I need to know are going to be willing to DH or move around the field. We know Ryan O'Hearn has some outfield experience. Josh Naylor, on the other hand, really pretty much just the first baseman in DH. You need to have the roster flexibility so that when you do call up the other guys in the form of maybe Jacob Reimer or in Ryan Clifford, that you can insert them at whatever their natural position is. As far as Jacob Reimer goes, he is pretty much going to be a designated hitter. They are basically saying this is a Mark Vientos 2.0. He is a third baseman, but he really is not a good defensive prospect. So I don't have a ton of hope for Jacob Reimer. There we go. I appreciate it. Hakeem the Dream with the super chat, $10. Thank you, Hakeem. He says Pete Alonso ain't worth $150 million. Nimmo ain't worth $160 million. Lindor definitely not $320 million. That's the real problem with the Mets. Stop overpaying the above average players. Okay, Hakeem the Dream. Once again, thank you for the super chat, $10. Thank you, sir. You know, let's be honest, man. If we want to take a step back from it all, who of these professional baseball players are actually worth this kind of money? None of them are. But this is the market value. These are the rates that these guys go for these days. I mean, you know, you could tell the exact same thing about Trey Turner. Is Trey Turner worth $300 million over 10 years? Absolutely not. But this is what the market demands for them. This is what other teams pay their guys. But I understand not everybody has lived up to those contracts. I think that if the Mets had hindsight, they would not have given that contract that they did to Brandon Nimmo. Unfortunately, look, yes, the offensive numbers were there. They were pretty solid this year for Brandon, but you can tell he is slowing down. He has completely changed into a guy that is basically a 3 true outcome type of hitter where it's home run, walk, or strikeout. And that was not who Brandon Nimmo was when he first came up. So again, hindsight 2020, I think they would not have given Brandon Nimmo that contract that they ended up giving him. But I hear you 100%. Hakeem, thank you again for the super chat. Really appreciate it, guys. If you want to keep the streams going here, really appreciate super chats, tips as well. You could do that. The link to that is in the description down below of this video. And definitely be sure to leave this video a like as well. Thank you all for tuning in. Let me go back up here to the chat. Danny Adams, pay Pete. I think he's good for team morale, but he'll miss a pitch punching his glove if he's not at first base. He does have a habit of always punching his glove, right? I actually did that a lot when I was playing myself growing up. But yeah, look, I'd like to pay Pete. I think 150 is worth it, to be honest. I know Hakeem just said he doesn't think it is, but I would do 150 for Pete. A 5-year contract at $30 million each. It's exactly what they're expecting here from him on his market value estimate heading into free agency this year. I don't think you're overpaying. And more importantly, just like in the terms of those contracts with Max Verlander, with Max Scherzer and with Justin Verlander a couple off seasons ago. Now, I know maybe not great examples because they did not age so well, but they are high average annual value contracts with short terms. Those will never kill you. Yes, it may suck for that one particular year or for that second year. It may not work out the time that they are here. But a 5-year contract for Pete, that is a pill that you can swallow even if it does not turn out well. Now, that will affect how the Mets navigate the rest of the offseason and how they fill out the rest of this roster, which is what I'm about to get into here. But first, Sandman Games, my man. What's up, Sandman? Hope you're doing well. Got a great MLB The Show YouTube channel. You guys should check that out. I believe he just won the World Series, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Sandman? Congratulations. He says, Pete for life. Number 20 will be retired. I would not be surprised. Number 20 will be up in the rafters one day at Citi Field. That is for sure. They're running out of room up there at the top of the tank there at Citi Field for retired numbers as they just keep putting more and more up. But yes, if Pete is re-signed and remains a Met, at least for the majority here of his final few years, Yes, he will 100% have his number 20 retired at Citi Field. CB24203 says he could put it on and punch it in the dugout. Yeah, his glove, right? Sandman, hi, Tony. Mookie, happy offseason. Less pain for now, except your Jets. Yes, my Jets, who probably just set the sport of football back 100 years with their performance yesterday in London. They actually said, please take them back. Do not ever let them step foot on our land ever again. They are banned from Europe. Buzz Bass, time to change the core. They've won nothing with him. Spread the money elsewhere. So that was the whole reason I wanted to do this stream here tonight, guys, because it's a really interesting question. Do you invest in Pete, who we have not won anything with, who we have basically went make the playoffs, don't make the playoffs, make the playoffs, don't make the playoffs, just alternating year in and year out with the majority of this core? Or do you try to improve the rest of this roster? And that is exactly what I'm going to talk about right here right after I finish up on the chat. Jose Lopez, the lingering question is, who the hell is going to protect Soto in the lineup? Bellinger, Naylor, Nimmo? Are you kidding? A good question. And Pete did a really good job of protecting Soto in the lineup this year, no doubt about it. And that is something that needs to be on the Mets to-do list if they decide that they can't come to terms with Pete this offseason. Buzz Bass says, time to retool a little, need to build the rotation, bullpen, center field. I don't see a playoff push in 2026. There's definitely some things to build. I think some of them are going to hope that they get done internally. I think some they might try through free agency, and some they might even try for trades. I think that nothing is off limits this offseason. That is for sure. I would not be surprised to see some major shakeups to this roster year over year from 2025 heading into opening day next season. Meanwhile, in Syracuse, why are we so worried about Alonso's defense when the real problem is right field? Move Soto to the DH. Yeah, I mean, I've said it. I've been critical about Soto. He's passable in right field, but I mean, that is putting it nicely. He's 26, going to be 27 next year. I think he prides himself on trying to be a good defensive player, but let's just be honest, he is nothing special out there. And I said it from the beginning, I'd like to see Soto really be more of a DH, but that is not how they negotiated that contract with him. And so I don't expect that to change anytime soon. We've heard some rumors and ideas, at least it was really just thought tank stuff from Mets fans on social media about them moving him to first base. Let's stop with this nonsense already. Please, look. It's not as easy as people want to make it sound. Moving to first base, that is the solution for everybody when they don't like a position player in their current position. It is not that easy, and the defense at first base matters. If Pete is re-signed, I am not moving Juan Soto off of right field, that is for sure. And if Pete is not re-signed, I'm also not moving Juan Soto to first base. It is DH, right field, or left field for me with Juan Soto. That is for sure. Scott, if Soto could play first base, that would help so much. I mean, I know a lot of people are saying maybe he can. I don't know. I mean, he is relatively athletic. He's kind of in that Manny Machado mode. He's smooth with it. He kind of glides. He makes it look very nonchalant. Sometimes that makes it look like he's not much of a hustler. I don't know. It's not as easy as a lot of people like to make it seem to just move him to first base and he'll figure it out. It's a little more complicated, and it's very important to your infield defense to be good over there. So not saying it's impossible, but I don't think that is the route that I personally would want to go here in just the second year of Juan Soto's 15-year contract. Rod, if Alonso agrees to DH, pay him. If he doesn't and still wants first base, bye-bye Pete, and get Ryan O'Hearn since he's older, and we'll probably give Ryan Clifford and others 2 to 3 years to prep. Yeah, I mean, Ryan O'Hearn is definitely a good option in my opinion. Not against that whatsoever. We know he can play first. We know he can play some outfield. Gives the rest of those prospects, the Reimers and the O'Hearns and all those other guys, to figure out where they will play and where they'll fit into this big league roster in the future if they do end up graduating to the Mets' current team. So, but guys, look, this is what I wanted to say here. The whole idea of taking this page out of the Yankees playbook from last offseason when they missed out on the Juan Soto sweepstakes, they pivoted to plan B, as they liked to call it. They signed Max Fried, who I think, in my opinion, they probably knew Garrett Cole was going to get Tommy John surgery at some point in the near future. That was their insurance policy. He was tremendous for them up until game 2 of the American League Division Series against the Blue Jays. Then they acquired Cody Bellinger from the Cubs in that trade and took on his contract that was at $26 million plus for this year. He had a player option that he has declined. And now, as you see here on the list, number 2, right above Pete Alonso's name, Cody Bellinger is listed at $30 million for his market value. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. Number 1, Cody Bellinger is a year younger. I'm sorry, half a year younger than Pete Alonso. Really, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't mean a whole lot. I mean, 6 months. I mean, his birthday is next July. Pete's is coming up here in December. So they will both be 31 by this time in July of next year. So it's really not a significant difference there. And you can see they even basically made the same money here this year. And if you want to take a look at the offensive numbers for the two guys this season, I'm going to show them to you right here now. Cody Bellinger had a 272 average, exact same as Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso had a better on-base percentage at 347. Slugging percentage, Pete 524 to Cody Bellinger's 480. OPS, Pete's significantly better by nearly 60 points. 871 compared to Cody Bellinger's 813. And OPS plus, Pete Alonso was at 144, while Cody Bellinger was at 125. Cody played in 152 games, so a full season. But Pete Alonso literally played in every single game of the 2025 season for the Mets. And despite all of these numbers favoring Pete offensively, what is your biggest takeaway from this right here? Because for me, it's the fact that Cody Bellinger still was worth 1.6 more wins above replacement than Pete Alonso was. And that speaks to the volume of how bad Pete Alonso's defense is at first base. And this is not something I was saying last year, but it was truly exposed this season with Pete at first. And so my plan B is really not all that different from what the Yankees did with their plan B last year, because it literally would include Cody Bellinger. Because Cody Bellinger continues to be a great slugger, left-handed bat, something that the Mets could or could not use. I mean, you got Soto in there now. It'd be nice to keep Pete's righty stick, but you could always use a left-handed stick in the middle of your lineup, right? But more importantly, Cody Bellinger can essentially play all three outfield positions extremely well. Basically, could be your opening day center fielder for the first 2+ months of this season until Carson Benj is ready to make his debut and take over the reins out there. He can go play left field and give Brandon Nimmo a blow here and there, who clearly could use it because he is slowed down not only at the plate, but defensively as well. He could play right field and give Juan Soto some opportunities to DH more often. Oh, and by the way, Cody Bellinger came up as a first baseman and grades out significantly better than Pete Alonso does defensively at first base. So if you're asking me, between Pete Alonso and Cody Bellinger, my heart's saying Pete Alonso, of course. My brain is telling me, all things being equal, Cody Bellinger is probably a better fit for this team. He gives you so much luxury in terms of defensive versatility that he can go to all three outfield spots. And I just laid it out. In center field, he gives you the luxury of letting Carson Benj begin the season in AAA until he's proven he's ready to command center field on an everyday basis at the big league roster, on the big league stage. He could play left field and give Brandon Nimmo some time off of his feet and DH more often. He could do the same in right field with Juan Soto, giving him more time to DH. And of course, can play first base. And for those that are going to say, well, he's a Yankee Stadium merchant and, all those home runs came because of the short portion right field. Okay, I'll admit, yes, there's no doubt about it. He had 30 home runs this year. It's 29, actually. I apologize. 25 home runs for Cody Bellinger if he played all 162 of his games at Citi Field this season. So is it a little bit of a drop-off in terms of the power production, the numbers? Absolutely, it is. I'm willing to admit that. But what do you get back? You get a rejuvenized Brandon Nimmo because he's not playing left field every day. You get quality up-the-middle defense in center field when Bellinger is out there. A bat that actually can produce more than what we got from Tyrone Taylor and from Jose Siri and Cedric Mullins, whose name should just be banned from being even said in Mets lore for the rest of history. And of course, the same in right field with Juan Soto. So I personally think, money being equal, my brain tells me the better option is to go out and try to get Cody Bellinger, and he makes this a better team. And oh, by the way, it may not even be as much money as what Pete Alonso is seeking, or length of contract for what Pete is seeking. So it's tough for me. Again, money and contract being equal, I think the better option is Cody Bellinger. But again, it really would be tugging on my heartstrings to not bring Pete back and see that we bring this dude in. I don't know. That's just me. Let's see. Jose says, I'm afraid that Stingy Stearns will structure a competitive team in 26, but not a playoff-bound team. That's a big difference. I think it is ultimately really going to largely depend on how the pitching performs and on how the young guys come up and develop for this team. In the form of Benj, Clifford, Williams, maybe a surprise guy here or there. I think that is going to be a big thing. And of course, the continued strides of Nolan McLean in the rotation. Brandon Sproat, does he crack it on opening day? If he doesn't, does he come up at some point, and how does he look? And the same for Jonah Tong. So I think it's largely going to depend on how the rotation looks and what the prospects, not only in the form of pitchers, but also position players, add to this team. I think the lineup is going to score again. I hope they're going to be more consistent than they were this year. They obviously were not. The final numbers on them actually look pretty solid for them. But we're going to get more consistency and avoid those long lows, those big, long, month-long slumps that we saw from the Mets this year. So I think those are going to be the keys there, Jose. Let's see. Meanwhile, in Syracuse, with Nimmo and Soto in the corners, we're going to need an elite center fielder to cover ground 100%. Yeah. And I think you get an elite center fielder from Cody Bellinger. And that's even only for the first year of that contract. You still got Tyrone Taylor as a fourth outfielder that can do that for you. And then hopefully Carson Benj is just about ready to come up. And all the profiles on him say that he sounds like a well above average center fielder defensively himself. So I think you're really kind of covering all your bases here by getting a guy like Cody Bellinger. Mark Rapp, sorry, I've been drinking. Hopefully something good, Mark. Buzz Bass, I don't think the Yankees will allow it to happen again. We'll see. I mean, they may not have a choice in the matter. If the Mets want to pay the guy, the Mets will pay the guy. Scott, Belly and Naylor. Naylor can play first base and a little bit of outfield too. Yes, he can. And, that is definitely, look, this team needs more of those 2022 additions. And if you guys remember, of course, Max Scherzer was the big signing of the offseason that year. But they also added some very key kind of role players. Starling Marte at that time, yes, he was a right fielder. We gave him that 4-year, $80 million contract. Really great that 2022 season. And he was a little more than a role player, but one of those guys that is an everyday kind of impact player. They signed Mark Canha, who at the time probably shouldn't have been a starting everyday player, but he had his moments and was very impactful. And then Eduardo Escobar, who probably was the least of all those signings as far as position players that offseason. But even he brought something. He was solid defensively at third base. Every now and then would go on a little bit of a hot streak. Those are the kinds of deals the Mets need to make this offseason, in my opinion. They need to round out the margins of this roster. Last year was really nice to get the big Soto splash, and we already had Pete back, and then we got, of course, we have Lindor and Nimmo and all those names, but they didn't really do anything to fill in the gaps around those guys. Trading for Jose Siri, of course, was a disaster. Outside of that, there really were no other additions to this roster. They re-signed Jesse Winker. Of course, he basically missed the entire season. That really hurt this team. So those are the kinds of deals, the kinds of additions that I would like to see the Mets make, the Josh Naylor type names. So definitely a place for those guys as well, no doubt about it. Let's see, Rod. So does anyone else think we need to trade Nimmo, or is it just me? I think a lot of people probably feel that way about Brandon Nimmo, but unfortunately, it's just basically an untradeable contract at this point in time. I mean, he is due, I think. Let's take a look at it. I'm going to actually look it up here. Guys, leave this video a like if you have not already. Really appreciate y'all being here. I am watching Game 2 of the ALCS, and Seattle is just bashing the Blue Jays 10-3, about to take a 2-0 series lead, heading back home to Toronto. Crazy stuff. So Nimmo signed an 8-year, $162 million contract with the Mets after the 2022 season. So he's now played 4 years of it. That means there are 1, 2, 3, 4 more years at $20 million apiece. I don't see many teams out there. I'm sorry, there are 5 years left of it. 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. 5 more years of Brandon Nimmo at $20 million a pop. And based on his defensive metrics and even just the eye test, if you don't want to nerd out with me, that's fine. But if you just watch Brandon Nimmo every day in left field, you know he is taking a step back. He's not getting to balls as quickly in front of him as he used to in the gaps, misjudged some that were behind him, had a lot of trouble even just picking the ball up out of the corner sometimes. And of course, we all know, let's just be honest, Brandon Noodle arm. Brandon Nimmo's got the noodle arm. So you add in the fact that, look, he's trending more and more toward being a full-time DH than anything. I just don't see another team wanting to take on 4 more years of Brandon Nimmo, 5 more years of Brandon Nimmo at $20 million a pop. So, Rod, I think a lot of people agree with you. I think the problem is there's not many teams that want to pay him $100 million over the next 5 years. So as much as I love Nimmo and as much as I would love to see him be a Met for life, I would personally trade him if it was possible. I just don't think it is at this current juncture. Jose says, when it comes to structuring a pitching staff, sorry, but Stingy Stearns can't be trusted because he loves his reclamation projects. We shall see. I mean, look, the thing about Milwaukee while he was there, and even to this day, where of course he still has his fingerprints all over that roster, is that Stearns was a savant at finding starting pitching, relievers, building really strong bullpens. For whatever reason, that was not the case this year. We know that last year was really solid for the bullpen and for the starting rotation. It pretty much led them to the playoffs and to the NLCS last year until it ultimately fell apart. But for whatever reason, it didn't work that way in 2025. And I don't know how they fix that this year. They need a lot of additions. They need a lot of improvement from some of the current names. I don't know exactly. But no more of these Frankie Montoses. No more of these, we're going to see if it sticks against the wall type of names. There need to be some bona fide, legitimate starting pitchers and relievers added to this roster. So I understand what you're saying, Jose. Say, man, Mets are a mess. Flush and Queens, flush the toilet every time, man. Every freaking time I go to Flush and Queens, that's all I could think about. They had to put us in Flush and Queens. Really? Really? They couldn't have thought of a different name for it, or could we just not refer to it? Meanwhile, in Syracuse, give Nimmo and McNeil 2 extra years and no trade clauses in their contract. Man, McNeil's got to go. McNeil's 100% got to go. I would do anything to try to get rid of him. Epler, thanks for shooting us in the foot. Yeah, Billy Epler, genius that he was, right? Well, he did get Scherzer that year, right? Yeah, but also wasn't able to keep Jacob deGrom. So, but then again, let's be honest. If David Stearns was the Mets GM at the time of Jacob deGrom's free agency post-2022, he would not have re-signed deGrom either. So it's just kind of the trend in Major League Baseball. You don't want to pay for aging veterans, especially starters that are basically always the most injured players in all of professional sports. I mean, I mentioned the Max Fried deal with the Yankees here. They gave him an 8-year contract or something like that. He's like 30, 31. They are going to be really, really wishing they didn't do that deal 2-3 years from now, in my opinion. And you love it. He's giving you a chance right now, but on the back end of that deal, man, that is tough. And I think the Rangers got a nice little bounce back here from deGrom after, of course, he missed the last year and a half because of Tommy John surgery. I mean, they're not complaining. They won a World Series in spite of it, but they're going to be paying a significant amount of money to a guy that I don't see a lot of longevity left in his career, in my opinion. So anyway, the Bellinger idea is something that I wanted to bring up, and it also allows the Mets some flexibility in some other areas if he does not sign for the same length or amount of money that Pete Alonso might be seeking this offseason. And that is why I brought up this plan B, where the Mets could also go out and sign a legitimate starter to improve this rotation. There are a lot of names out there as well, some bigger than others. I personally really like the idea of a guy like Ranger Suarez. I mentioned him. There's Dylan Cease, who is going to look to get paid. He is someone that, for the money they're talking about him getting, I'm not super impressed by or maybe willing to give that to him, though there's definitely some upside with him. And then, of course, this also gives the Mets a chance to maybe improve in another area on the diamond, which is something they got to do. Because I know a lot of people really happy with what they saw from Brett Baty in the second half of this season, but I'm not buying it again. I'm not saying he can't do it again. I'm just not going in as a blind believer in Brett Baty the way that I had in the past. I was happy what we got from him. 17, 18 home runs, I think 17 this year, 50 RBIs. It was clearly the best we have seen out of Brett Baty at the big league level so far in his major league career. But the ups and downs and highs and lows and peaks and valleys of Brett Baty will not fool me again. And so I want to go into next season with a legitimate third baseman, and doing this plan B pivot might afford them the opportunity to go out and sign a guy like Murakami, the Japanese star who's 25 years old and about to be posted by his team out of the MVP. Nippon League? I think it's MVP. So me personally, look, I love the idea of signing Pete. I hope it happens. But we'd be foolish not to, at the very least, think of some alternatives. And think, hey, could this be better for the Mets' long-term outlook, for their long-term payroll flexibility, for their roster defensive versatility? Can we take some of that money and sprinkle it into some other areas that this team really needs? Of course, we know the rotation, a bullpen that really needs to be rebuilt, some positions on the diamond that we don't exactly have a great idea about exactly how they look at this moment. So, Pete, we hope you're back. It'd be great to have you here long-term, forever, a career Met. But there are definitely other opportunities and avenues in which the Mets can get back to being a winning team in 2026 that don't include Pete Alonso. Call me devil's advocate, call me a hater, just trying to lay all the cards on the table here. Guys, you're the best. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're going to wrap it up here. Just keep it really short. I'm going to try to be doing this now on every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday is the plans here moving forward. To be determined still. We'll see. It's also going to just depend on when news is coming out. Can't talk about nothing, but I'll try to get creative here as the offseason rolls along. But guys, be sure to subscribe if you're not already. Go ahead and leave this video a like if you haven't done that. Really, really appreciate that. Thank you again to Hakeem the Dream for the $10 super chat. Really appreciate you so much, Hakeem. Thanks for tuning in. Real quick, Rod says, all right, well then pull the Jets with Aaron Rodgers, pay out McNeil and Nimmo contracts. I can't watch another game with them wearing a Mets jersey and starting anymore. I'm good with Nimmo. I feel that way about Jeff McNeil. But as far as Aaron Rodgers, hey, he's looking pretty good for the Steelers right now. My Jets are not looking so good. So it is what it is to be a Ets fan, as they call them. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Really do appreciate y'all. We're going to wrap it up right here. But again, we're going to try to do 2 to 3 of these a week here now moving forward. So thank you so much once again. Until next time, I'm Tony Metro. Stay true to the orange and blue.